welcome everyone to Family History Club. This is our Preserving Photos and Letters session, and this is like one of my favorite sessions that we do. I really like this one. We do like a every other month meeting of Family History Club. So if this is your first time attending, welcome, and we will have another session um, in August. So I'll give information about that at the end. But we kind of meet and talk about available resources for doing family history research. And if you have any questions while we do the presentation, you can just type them in the chat box and we will get to those at the end. And we also had a couple that were sent to us before the class, so we'll get to those at the end. And I'm also going to go ahead and Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind putting a link to that handout in the chat.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. And then while we're doing the presentation, if you wouldn't mind everyone muting their mics just so we don't get any feedback. And then at the end, when we have like our Q&A, we can all unmute and discuss. Introductions here. I'm Shanna. I'm the South Carolina Room Supervisor with the Greenville County Library System. And just a little bit of background on myself. I have a background in historic preservation, and I also minored in photography. And so that's one reason why I really like this session on preserving photos and letters. And Rebecca's here, and she is also going to be presenting in the middle part of the class. And right now she's going to kind of be moderating and putting those links in the chat. But Rebecca is our digitization librarian with the Greenville County Library System, and we're both happy to be here to share this information with you today. And if you would like, I'm always interested to see where everyone is watching or listening from. So if you want to put what state you're from in the chat, feel free. Always interested to see what other states we have, because I think someone last time was from Ohio, so that was really neat. And before we actually get into our class goals today, I thought we'd also just do a quick poll to see what types of materials you all might be most interested in learning how to preserve. So this is preserving photos and letters. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. It's an anonymous poll, so feel free to respond if you'd like. So I just started the poll, and the question is, what types of materials are you most interested in preserving? We have black and white photographs, color photographs, digital photos, letters, negatives, or slides. And I realize that that's probably not everything that you may have that you're interested in. And so if there is something that's not on this list, you can put that in the chat too. We can talk about it. But we'd just like to kind of see maybe what folks are interested in learning about the most, and maybe we can focus a little bit more time on those. Okay, so I'm seeing black and white photos. We have about 67%. We have some letters, color photos. You may have both.
In the chat, we have preservation of greeting cards.
Ooh, nice. That's a good one. So yeah, you may have other types of materials. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll in just a second. But that's nice. We've got kind of a variety here. So mostly photos and some of those documents such as greeting cards and letters. That's neat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And I'm going to share the results real quick with everyone. So thanks so much for engaging with us and participating in that poll. Okay, I'm going to move on to our class goals for today, what we hope to accomplish during this hour session. The first is going to be to talk about ways that you can care for your original photos and letters. And I'll be doing that portion of the class. And then I'm going to pass it along to Rebecca after that, and she's going to talk about the process of actually scanning photos and creating the digital images from those. And then I will then talk about some ways that you can store and organize your digital photos online. So we kind of have 3 different parts today, and then we'll have the Q&A at the end. Okay, so let's get started. So diving in here, just wanted to give like a very brief history, a little bit about photography and the early photographs. And the first photographic image was developed by Nicephore Niepce with a camera obscura around 1825. And camera obscura literally translates or means dark room. And photography is basically a way of fixing the camera image by the action of light upon substances sensitive to it. The earliest photos are the daguerreotype photos from 1839, which you can see an example pictured here on this slide. The Garreau daguerreotype cameras were introduced in about September 1839 and were the first of a series of cameras designed for the world's first commercial photographic process, which is known as the daguerreotype. When we're thinking about photos, there could be a different types of support depending on your photo. That support could be metal, glass, plastic, or paper. If you have a metal or glass photo, I'm always interested to know if people have those types of photos. Feel free to comment in the chat about the types of photos you have, if you have like a metal type or a daguerreotype. For this class, we'll primarily be focusing on photos with the paper supports. And if you have glass or metal types of photos, do not try to repair those on your own. Those are usually going to require a conservator to contact them about those because they are just a little bit, need a little bit more special care. And Rebecca has linked in the chat, the handout. And there is actually some links to, if you are interested in finding a conservator, how to reach out and do that. And photos also have what is called the emulsion or the binder layer, which is the top layer of your photo. Common types of binders are albumin, collodion, and gelatin. I just want you to keep this term in mind as we talk about handling photos because the emulsion is important and we don't want to damage the emulsion. So when you are dealing with your photographs or your letters, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ways to handle them so that you don't damage them. With photographs, we suggest using cotton gloves like you can see pictured, and that would be the best option. And then the alternative would be to make sure your hands are clean and dry and free from oils or lotions, and then to touch just the edges and the back. And you can see with that top layer with the emulsion, if you touch that and your hands aren't clean or dry, and you've probably seen this happen before, you can get your fingerprints on them and damage that photo. With paper and letters, we actually suggest not wearing gloves because they can actually sometimes cause more damage because you kind of lose the ability to feel the paper as well. So we suggest using clean, dry hands to handle paper materials and letters. And you can use a sheet of paper or cardstock to turn or lift if you have a very fragile document so that you don't damage it. So that's just a little bit of information about how to handle your original items. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about how to protect your original images. And so one of the biggest things that you can do is to think about where you are storing your documents and your photographs. We suggest storing in a cool, dry place that is away from direct sunlight. So if you think about your house, think about some of the most humid places in your home and the places where maybe the temperature fluctuates a lot or is really hot or really cold. And some places like this in the house could be your attic or your basement. And so those are not the best places for your documents or your photographs, even though sometimes those are areas that a lot of people use because they have space there. However, room temperature and humidity are very important and the lower the temperature, the longer your items will last. Cooler temperatures slow the rate of chemical decay and they also reduce insect activity. The ideal conditions for black and white photos are to have a temperature around 68 degrees and a humidity to be no greater than 50%, but not lower than 30%. Our archives here in the South Carolina room are kept between 64 to 68 degrees year round, and we try to aim for a 45% to 50% humidity level. And when you have negatives or color photographs and slides, they actually can benefit from a cooler environment when possible with the same types of relative humidity. But you want to also try to avoid very low levels of humidity, because low levels of humidity, such as below 15%, can actually cause brittleness. And if most of us are here from the South, we probably don't struggle that much with having too little humidity, but that's just something to keep in mind. With the temperature, heat does accelerate the rate of deterioration, and this can include chemical reactions, including deterioration, which are almost doubled with the increase of temperature of every 18 degrees. And when you have a high level of humidity, it provides the moisture necessary and can promote harmful chemical reactions to materials. And when it's combined with a high temperature, this can encourage mold growth and insect activity. So after you have a environment to where you can put your photos and images that is fairly well regulated with temperature and your humidity in your home, you also want to think about the types of storage enclosures for your materials. So some helpful materials that you can use are archival storage boxes and albums, which you can see pictured here. On this slide, we have some slides, which are in a 3-ring binder. And you can buy these types of binders and these types of, you can see these are sleeves that are specifically made for slides. You can get these from a number of different vendors, and on our handout, we've given a list of different places if you are interested in buying some of these types of albums. We also use polyester sleeves, and they're also commonly called Mylar sleeves. You can see that in the top photo here. The polyester sleeves are clear, so you can put your letters or your photographs. They come in all different kinds of sizes. And the great thing about the polyester sleeves is that since they're clear, you don't actually usually have to take the material out to view it. So that's something we use in the South Carolina room for our photo boxes that are in the archive. Visitors can come in and see these archive boxes, but we have those in the sleeve, so the actual original images do not have to be taken out of the sleeves, and they can still view them without removing them from there. So that's a great protective enclosure for your documents and images. And then we also use acid-free paper and acid-free folders, which you can see pictured on the top are some acid-free folders. Acid-free paper has a neutral pH, and when you have paper, the natural deterioration of lignin, and lignin is a natural part of plant cells and paper, and lignin causes the paper to become acidic and break down. And this makes many types of papers unsuitable for long-term use and storage. An example of this is newsprint. So I'm sure we're all familiar with that even if you have a newspaper for even just a few days in the right environment, or the wrong environment, I should say, it will start to yellow and get brittle. And that's because newsprint is highly acidic paper. So that's the type of things that can happen when your paper is acidic. Acid-free paper is made differently than other types of paper and other cheaper types of paper. It is made from different source materials and is used in situations where you want to try to give your documents a longer life without them yellowing and breaking down. And so on this slide, for a little bit more information about how to protect your original images, when you're thinking about, or if you print out photos and want to put them in an album, you want to try to avoid using the magnetic albums or the self-adhesive albums, because these can be very harmful to photographs. And so pictured on the right is actually an album we recently received via donation, and is an example of a self-adhesive album. And you can see the adhesive and the pages, it's yellowed. With these types of albums, There's usually two things that kind of happen with the adhesive. One, the adhesive fails and the photos become loose and they're no longer staying where you originally put them in the album. Two, the adhesive almost gets stronger and the photos become really stuck onto the adhesive and they're almost, impossible to remove. So we suggest to avoid using these types of albums. And I also mentioned interleaving when necessary. And what interleaving is placing that acid-free paper we were just talking about or the polyester film that we mentioned between the pages, that can help protect your photos. But when you add these, you want to be careful because if you put too many sheets inside of a binder, it can stress the binding and you never want to force the cover of your album closed. You also want to avoid using any type of glue or adhesive such as tape. And you can see on the bottom left is an example of a photograph that had tape placed on it. And you can see the yellowing there and see that it has caused damage to that photograph. Now I want to talk a little bit more and focus on kind of protecting your documents, such as your letters and things like that. When you are getting organized and sorting through your documents, first you want to make sure that your work area is clean and you don't have any food or drinks around it. You don't want to have a mishap right away with having something nearby that could spill on your items. You want to avoid folding or creasing documents when you store them. You want to try to lay them flat. You can see on the right there is a piece of paper that had been folded and had been kept like that for many years. And when it opened up, those creases are now on there and are going to be very difficult to get that to lay flat now. Also, avoid using paper clips or staples. You can see this image on this screen here. There's an outline of a paper clip that has rusted onto an envelope. And that's because when you use those types of paper clips and staples, they can have that chemical reaction and have that rust that happens and create that stain on your document. And they can also be very difficult to remove. If you have to use some kind of paper clip, it's best if you can try not to do that. But if you do absolutely have to use something like that or want to, there's something called plastic clips, which you can use, and it's a plastic type of material and it won't rust. And you can use those. And now I wanted to talk briefly about how to display your photos and documents if you did want to put those in a picture frame. The number one thing is kind of, once again, thinking about the environment and thinking about where they are going to be displayed. And you want to try to keep them out of direct light as much as possible because the sun can fade your photos. And one thing that you can do is actually to scan the item and make a copy and print that and put the original somewhere else and then put the copy on display so that the original is safe and protected and you won't have to worry about it, and then you'll have a copy on display. You want to try to mount in a window mat with UV filtered glass. The UV filtered glass can prevent that sun damage that can happen. And you also want to look for materials that have passed the photographic activity test. And you'll see that if you go and look on some of the vendors that we've listed, when you're looking at different types of materials and archival boxes and things like that, that oftentimes they'll say that they pass this PAT test. And basically, the PAT test is a test to make sure that these different types of materials go through to make sure that they will be safe for your photos and your documents, and they will be safe to use. So try to keep an eye out for that when you're looking, if you're looking at purchasing materials, to see if it's passed that test. And now I'm going to go ahead and pass this over, and Rebecca is going to talk about some scanning and equipment.
All right, so we've talked about what to do with your original physical photographs, but if you want to digitize them and get them onto your computer so that you can share them with family and friends or have some backup copies if something like a newspaper article is deteriorating, there are a lot of different ways you can go about scanning them. If you have like a large volume of a whole bunch of photographs or slides, there are auto feed scanners that you can put a stack of photographs in a pile and it'll pull them through. That will get through them really quickly. One of the versions of that is the Epson Fast Photo 640. The danger with that, though, is if you have a lot of fragile photos or if they're not perfectly flat, it could get jammed and stuck in the printer or scanner. Sorry. So that's a risk with those. But if you have a lot of just like perfect photographs from maybe like 1980s, 1990s, they can go through those feeders pretty efficiently if you want to scan a mass amount of photos at one time. What we use most of the time for our documents is the scanner that you see on the right. It's a flatbed scanner. And they're able to accommodate a different wide variety of sizes. The one in the background is like 11 by 24, something like that. But you can get different sizes based on what material you're trying to scan. So you can have some that are as small as like the sheet of paper. And then on the left, we have just a classic all-in-one printer. And these scanners you may already have one of those at home, and those scanning beds are actually as high enough quality these days that you can scan your photos on that and it'll be of similar quality to the one I have on the right in our digitization room. You can also use if you have a smartphone, you can take a picture with it. Same thing with a tablet. There are apps out there that you can download that will help with, getting it nice and straight, cropping it. So you can do it with your smartphone, and you can also use a digital camera. It's a little bit more difficult if you're trying to do a larger format. You don't want to be like standing on a chair trying to get a good photo of it. So a lot of times a flatbed scanner is one of the best options. But even if you don't want to invest in your own scanning equipment, at the Tech Center at most of the library branches and here at Maine, we have flatbed scanners and auto feed scanners. And in the South Carolina room, we have the scanner that you see in the middle there, and that is an overhead scanner. And that scanner is great for really fragile items, things that might have ripped or aren't laying perfectly flat, and you don't want to cram them into the flatbed scanner and press them down because they're fragile. And it's free to use to the public. The one in the South Carolina room, you can come on up. Right now we're doing appointments, so we can kind of plan ahead and make sure that we have it free and available for you. And at any of the branches or at the Tech Center at the Maine, you can use the scanner that's there. And I have a video clip of the center scanner just to give you an idea of how it works. This is our BookEye 4 scanner that we have in the South Carolina room. In addition to the flatbed scanners and auto feed scanners that we have at some of the branches, this is also available for patron use to scan your family photographs and letters. To get started with the machine, you're going to set whatever image or book or letter that you want face up. The camera is actually up here. So you'll be placing it face up, and we'll hit scan. We'll hit scan again. And it's going to ask you to accept a copyright notice that you're not violating anybody's copyright. We hit accept. And then the machine will scan over here. And once it's scanned, you can see it and as a thumbnail down below, but there's also a secondary screen above that lets you get a much more up-close view of what you just scanned. If you wanted only a portion of the picture, you wanted to crop out something, you can hit edit image and click and drag to make the image just of, say, the building here rather than the title. And you can click clip at the top and you can see it shrinks it down. It also does it on the screen above as well so that you can get a nice blown up view of what you're working on. And then you click done and you have your zoomed in view here as each thumbnail. If you didn't want to keep this other thumbnail, you click delete current image and then click delete again. You can also scan more than one image, so we can just pick another page in here to scan. Hit scan a second time. And you'll see it pops up the next image there. In order to scan it, so if we're happy with those two that we have,
we can click on send PDF to our email, and we would just type in our email address here and hit send. Or if you want to save it to a flash drive, you can plug that in up in the top right corner and hit more options. And you'll see that this big button up here lights up green. When it's out, it's gray. You plug it back in, it'll turn on blue. There we go. On these blue buttons on the left, you can select what type of file format you want. You can select PDF. It'll default to a PDF. You can do JPEG, PNG, or if you're doing some sort of text file, you can also do those. And you can also change if you want them all, say, all in one PDF, all the images in one PDF that you can scroll through. You can save them all as one file, or you can do one file per page. So you can have each individual photograph as its own file. And when you're ready, you just hit Save to USB drive, and it'll start loading it onto your flash drive. And when it's finished and said it's been successful, you hit End Session. Yes, it'll delete all the images that were on the machine, and you have finished. If you are planning to send something to your email address, we recommend only doing about 10 to 20 pages depending on how large of a file size your personal email can handle. Most email addresses can handle up to 10 megabytes. So you just want to make sure that you don't scan 100 pages and then try and send it to an email, because it will bounce back. When it shows up in your email, it'll be showing up as sending from GCLS BookScan. Also said we'll have the subject line of images from the KIC station, and that's just the name of the machine that auto-generates when it sends it to you. Sometimes this gets flagged as spam and may show up in your spam folder. So before you exit and end the session on your scanning session, be sure to check your email on your phone to make sure it did get received.
So that is free to use here at the main library up in the South Carolina room. And we've had people come in before and scan their photo albums on it and able to crop and get each individual image that they want out of it. So that's a great option if you have something stuck, say stuck in a magnetic album and you can't get it out and you want to scan it. This is a great option for that. And when you are scanning, each scanner typically comes with its own software. And so the settings might be in different places, but there are a few that you want to keep an eye out for. The first one is color. You will see often a black and white setting, and you want to avoid using this setting. You can see on the right at the top the difference between black and white and grayscale. When you scan black and white, it only scans the two colors, black and white. And when we're looking at a black and white photo, it's actually made up of a whole bunch of different shades of gray. So when scanning black and white photos, you'll want to use grayscale. And if you're doing things like letters, photographs, greeting cards that you mentioned earlier, you'll probably want to do it in color rather than in grayscale. The downside of scanning a photograph that's black and white in color is it's going to create a larger file size than necessary, because it's going to try and pick up on color in a photo that doesn't have color. So it just has a larger file size than necessary for storing it. The other setting you'll want to look for is resolution. And for most photographs, 300 to 400 DPI is a great size. It'll appear quite nicely on your screen, have a good resolution. But if you're scanning like a 4x6 photo and you're wanting to enlarge it to like a poster or a big banner for your family reunion, you're probably going to scan it at a slightly higher resolution, because if you don't scan it at high enough resolution, then you blow it up, it'll get kind of blurry on you because it didn't record enough detail. And DPI stands for dots per inch. And so that's just how many little dots of the image are captured. For slides, we scan typically about 1600 to 2000 DPI depending on the slide. And that's just so that when we do blow it up on a computer screen, we can enlarge it large enough to view on a screen. And at a certain point, if you're doing like photographs, so like taking that 4x6 classic photograph again, if you start scanning it at like 200 DPI, there is a certain point where it's overkill, where it has such a high resolution that our naked human eye will not be able to tell the difference between the 600 and the 2000 at a certain point. So you mostly just want to scan at the highest resolution for the purpose that you're wanting to use it for. So if you're wanting to like share these photos on social media, send them to your friends and family on email, you'll probably want to stick to the 300 to 400 DPI range so that it doesn't get bounced back or won't even be able to attach to an email. The other setting to look for are the file formats. The two that we use here in the South Carolina room are JPEGs and TIFF files. JPEGs are smaller files, and as I said, they're easier to share by email and social media if you're wanting to share it with your friends and family. And it's a great option, especially if you're short on storage space on your computer, because they have smaller file sizes. The con for using JPEGs is that they have what's called lossy compression. So every time that you open a JPEG file, it uncompresses it, makes it large, and then when you close it again, it compresses it, so it has a smaller file size. So if you're going to be opening it, editing the images, and resaving it multiple times, you'll start getting kind of a pixelated look, and you can kind of see that on the girl's face over there. It's kind of grainy looking. So JPEGs, if you're going to open them up, edit them, save them repeatedly, you'll start losing the image quality over time. To combat that, there are TIFF files, and TIFF files are lossless compression. They actually don't get compressed at all. So you can edit, open, and work with those images and not lose the integrity of the image over time. So that is great if you're wanting to preserve a photograph for a long period of time for future generations. The TIFF file format is a great one. The downside to TIFF files is they are much larger file sizes. So if you're short on space, JPEG would be your best bet. But if space is not a problem, TIFF might be a good option. All right. And then for digitizing your photos, you want to organize your photographs before you start scanning. It might be tempting to just scan them all at once, but if you don't organize it ahead of time, you're going to end up with a shoebox of photographs that you don't know what's in there, and you might scan them all and realize, oh, I didn't really want some of these images scanned. So going through and sorting before you scan will just save time. It'll save space on your computer if you want it to save as the TIFF file with a higher resolution. So just kind of organizing and knowing what you have before you scan is a great way to do it. You can sort any way that you want, just to be consistent with it. So you can sort by date, you can sort by family group, just so that you can keep track of what you have scanned. For storing them, the couple main options for storing them would be storing your items on your computer or an external hard drive, or in cloud storage, or on a thumb drive. So there's different options. We recommend picking at least one and kind of saving all your files to that one location, and then having a backup copy. So if you're going to save them all to your computer's hard drive, maybe investing in some sort of cloud option, so that if something happened to your computer at some point, you'd have a second copy of them available that you could make another backup copy from, and you wouldn't lose your images forever. And Shanna will be showing Google Photos as an option for cloud storage. It's a free photo storage option, so she'll be showing that in a little minute with a demo. And before I pass it back to Shanna, I was going to mention that the library is always interested in adding more Greenville history to our digital collection. So as you're sorting your family history and your family photos, if you find anything that is related to Greenville's history, we would be very interested in looking at it. We would be happy to digitize it for you and provide you a copy of it. And I will drop a link in the chat box for the Digitize Greenville initiative. So if you're interested and have anything, you can set up a time to drop some items off. Back to you, Shanna.
What I'm going to do now is to show a demo of Google Photos, and there are all kinds of online storage options. We just picked this one because it's a free storage option, and it's one that we are familiar with, and we have an account for the South Carolina room that we use. And on your handout on the last portion, our digital literacy coordinator, Nathaniel, actually did those instructions on different types of online storage and some tips for that. So be sure to check that out. And I've already logged into Google Photos. If you have a Gmail account, you already have access to be able to use Google Photos, and you just sign in with your Gmail account to get to this. You'll notice up here at the top, when you are signed in, under your Google account, you can access the different apps. And so I've just gone to Google Photos. And the first thing that pulls up is just my photos that we have in our South Carolina room Google account. And I wanted to talk about how you could create a new album and add new photos. So if I go over on this left side and I click on albums, you can see some of the albums that we have. And if you wanted to create a new album, it's really easy. You just go up to the top where it says create new album. So I'll kind of walk you through that. I downloaded some postcards from our digital collection earlier. So I'm going to create an album called Postcards. And then I'm going to select photos. This is a kind of a new feature I noticed the other day, is where you can select people and pets and create an auto updating album. I'm not going to do that right now, but I kind of wanted to show you this, that you can, new photos containing any of these faces will be automatically added. It's not actually showing, but if you had photos of people, you could actually select them, and then they would automatically be added to the album without you having to go and individually do it. But I'm just going to select photos from the computer. And I can also, these are some of the photos we have already. I could move them to this album, but I'm going to use the postcards that I downloaded earlier. And so I just put them on the desktop. I have 2 postcards. So I can select both of these and then just click on open. And it's going to upload them into this album here. Okay, so now I have both of my postcards in this postcards album. You can see that it's dated it up here for June 24th, so I know when I created it. If I click on one of the photos, you'll see it displayed here, and then I can do a few things in this screen. If I go up to this share option and click on that, I can actually share it with any of the people who are in our contacts list, which is a lot of our other branch locations, or I could search by name or add another email, or I could even send a link or share it on social media if I'd like to do that. The next little area is the edit icon, and if I click on that, there's just a lot of like filter options. I could change this to black and white if I wanted to. I could, apply some filters. I could also, in this third option over here, I could change the light, how bright it is. I could make the color a little bit more vibrant. I could make it pop a little bit more. For what we do, we usually try to keep everything like the original for the most part. And then on the next little icon there, you can actually rotate your image, and you could crop it if you needed to, dragging these arrows if I needed to crop. And once you have your image edited, just click done, and it'll save those changes. And then I also want to talk about this little icon here. It's the info icon. So here is where you can kind of add what we kind of refer to as metadata. So you can add some information about your photograph. So I could add a description. I could say, I could even put a title, greetings from Greenville. You can make it whatever you'd like. I already have the information about when I uploaded that. I have the file name. I just used the file name that we had in the digital collection. So that is what is on the file name here. It tells me how big the photo is. It tells me that it has been uploaded from the web browser. If I had taken a photo of a vacation or something, I could also add a location if I wanted to, and that would be in there as well. This is just to favorite this photo if you wanted to do that. And then you also have some options from this little drop down, little 3 dots there. I could add it to another album. I could do a slideshow. You could download it to your computer again if you wanted to, or to your flash drive. So that's just some of the album options. And then I wanted to go back and show you a couple of other features in the Google Photos. So the Google Photos is very smart. We've added several photos of historic Greenville in here as well. So we have some photos of horses and trains. So let me see if this is going to work. If I search for trains, it's going to pull up photos of trains. I could even search for photos of horses, and you'll see that it pulls the photos that I have that are of horses. So that's pretty neat. I actually did not put any description that this was a horse. The AI for Google Photos is really good. So it knows that it's a horse. So that's kind of interesting. It also, like that option I showed you earlier where you can select someone and then it'll add them to the album, it gets familiar with faces. So you can even, if you searched by, if you kind of said, oh, this is mom or something, you could search by mom and it would start to pull and recognize which photos are of mom and start pulling those when you search. So it's just really, really interesting feature. With Google Photos, you have 15 gigabytes of free storage, and then you have the option to purchase more. So we've used a little over half of our storage right now. When you get to, let me just show you some of the utilities here, which is below the albums. You can actually create a little movie or an animation or a collage. So if you wanted to share an animation or collage with family members, you could create that. You can also go up to this print store option. And once it loads, I'll show you that you can actually have photos from your albums printed in books if it'll load. If it doesn't load, I'll just tell you about it. But here we go. So you can do it, you can do with Google. I mean, there's all kinds of printing options out there. But this is one that's available here is you can make a photo book and you can choose from any of your photos that you want to put in the book. And then once you have those selected of the ones you want to include, you can actually work on the layout of your book. And you do have to have a certain amount. I don't actually have enough in here right now. And sometimes it'll say if it's too low of a resolution. When I downloaded these, I just did a small file size as an example, but it will let you arrange your book however you'd like. And then you can order that book and they'll send it to you with your photo album. So definitely some interesting features that you can explore with Google Photos. I'm not going to save my photo book today. Oh yes, let me show you also just the settings tab, which is up here at the top. So you have your little gear. So this is also some settings that you can play around with if you're using this. So right now we are using the storage saving option. So it will store at a slightly reduced quality, but for what we use this for, that's okay. However, you can choose the original quality option and it's going to store them the way that you've uploaded them. So at their original quality, you will not have any reduction in that. That will take up more space, but that's up to you of what you're wanting to use the online storage for, of whether or not you want to choose one from one of those options. So I just wanted to kind of mention that as part of your settings. And there's all kinds of other settings, but I thought that one was kind of probably one of the more important ones to mention. And then, like I said, you get the 15 gigabytes free, and then you can buy 100 more gigabytes for $1.99 a month. But there's all kinds of photo options out there. We aren't endorsing a certain one. We just wanted to kind of share about one of the options here. And then also in your handout, you can look at some additional ones. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. So I thought we would go ahead and kind of get into our Q&A. And we can look at some in the chat too, but I thought we could start with one that we got ahead of time. So Tina, I think you're here. I think this is your question. Hey, so you asked, what is the best way to preserve photos, letters, programs, and newspaper clippings that are glued into the paper pages of a 60-year-old leather-covered scrapbook?
Yeah, it's just a lot and it's all crammed in there. And
so
I just wondered if the leather makes it more complicated.
Yes, leather can be acidic. It's dependent upon kind of how the leather was, let me think of the word, how the leather, like, it's determined by the leather making process, but leather can be acidic. And as we've kind of talked about, acidic materials can cause deterioration. That being said, there's a lot of old books that are leather that are still in good condition, as long, if it's not having any kind of stability issues. One option, you could digitize that album,
Yeah.
work on doing that so that you have copies of those images. You could interleave with the acid-free paper if you were worried about the leather touching. As far as them being glued, are they still pretty stuck on there, or is that as you
Oh,
failed? Okay, so they've
oh
kind of
yeah.
done that reaction where they're probably even more so.
Yeah. And I just kept it in a big tub, like with a lid
Yeah.
that so water or anything can't get in it, and carried it around for like 25 years, thinking I just don't want any water to get to it. But I've never thought if there's something, I've never known if there's something else I should do that could make it, could help it, I guess.
I mean, I think it's good to keep it away from the water and things like that. Since you have a fairly larger size album, there's probably still types of enclosures. You may look on some of those sites to see if there's anything that it might fit in that was like a archival box.
Mhm.
That might be an option. And then if it's something really valuable and important, contacting a conservator about the glue, because I wouldn't try to remove them when they're on there that way.
Mhm.
But they might be
But
able.
your big scanner, that's a good idea. The scanning the whole page, I hadn't thought of that. So that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's great, especially if you have scrapbooks that have handwritten notes, like they're not on the photos, it's next to the photos, there's captions. That's a
Mhm.
great way to get everything in context.
Definitely.
Also, there was the question that somebody was interested in the greeting cards, and while Rebecca was kind of talking, I did look, and there actually is a specific greeting card archival box out there. It's made for greeting cards. I believe that was on Gaylord Archival. So that there's definitely options out there if you are wanting to kind of have a storage solution for your greeting cards. They even make one specifically for that. And looks like, let's see, Dawn and Linda, do you recommend using archival tape on torn documents? I try to avoid using tape when possible.
One thing about like the Mylar sleeves, when you put them in there, it has a little bit of a static that holds it together. So some of the letters that we get that are torn, we can put them back in there and it'll hold it in place. So that's one way that we kind of combat torn documents and photos, is we put them in one of those sleeves.
Yeah, you can kind of encapsulate them. If it's not something you're going to be taking, you wouldn't want to do that if you're taking those in and out, because the static can actually create damage. If you try to take it out and it's already torn, it can sometimes tear it even more. But if it's something that you're really not going to need to take in and out, then you could do like a Mylar sleeve, like Rebecca said. That could be a good option. But avoid sticky notes too. I know those are so readily available, and seem like a good idea, but if you leave those on, they actually will have a residue. Even though they don't seem like they're that sticky, they will leave a residue. So avoid sticky notes too. Do we have any other questions?
I have one.
Okay, Linda.
It goes back to the archival tape. I have some court documents from the early 1800s. They had started to tear and somebody used some Scotch tape on them. So of course it's yellowed and brittle. And is it okay to just try to remove that Scotch tape? Or just put it in the Mylar folder like that? What should I do with it?
I
I'd
would
say
say
to remove it.
you would say to remove it.
I'd hesitate to remove
That's
it.
what I was saying. I would be hesitant unless it's really kind of falling off of there.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It come off there easily.
Yeah, I mean, you could even, they make what are called micro spatulas. They look like a tiny little spatula,
Uh-huh.
and it helps you kind of get under things like tape or even documents. It might help you kind of lift very carefully off of there if you really wanted to try to remove it. If it was something very valuable, I'd still have a conservator, a discussion with a conservator.
It's valuable to me, and that's
Yeah.
really it.
Yeah, so it might be something just to make sure what they recommend. And there are some preservation leaflets that we have in our handout for the class that
Okay.
talk about dealing with kind of things like that. So you might take a look at some of there's a whole section for just photographs, and they give some good tips about how to do it. But for the most part, we have a lot of things that come in with tape, and we usually just leave them on there unless it's just really hanging by a thread on there. We usually leave it on there, and it's because we're just don't want to damage it. But yeah, it's up to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'll put the handout in one more time just in case we had anybody that came after. So what I'll do, I'm just gonna share my screen one more time and just talk about some of our upcoming events, and then we'll conclude. But these were great questions. Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, once again, thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for your great questions. We will be having Ashley and Simpson will be doing the virtual genealogy drop-in via Zoom. That's our next kind of history genealogy event coming up, and that's going to be on Thursday, July 22nd from 4 to 5 p.m. You can get to that from visiting our website, and it's under virtual events, but I'll put the link in the chat. And then our next Family History Club meeting is going to be on exploring county records. And I will be doing that one. I'll be focusing more on Greenville County, but I will give resources for other counties too. And that's going to be on Thursday, August 26th from 4 to 5 p.m. So I'll put those in the chat in just a second so you can have the links for those. And then as always, please follow us if you are on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you ever have any questions, you can email askalibrarian@greenvillelibrary.org. We're happy to answer any of your questions. If you have any suggestions for upcoming topics, love to hear those as well. I'm still planning the one for October. So feel free to share if you have a topic you'd like to hear about. Thank you all once again, and we'll hope to see you at the next genealogy events.